Welcome to Rock Solid, the Round Rock Business Leaders Podcast. Join your host, Bryan Eisenberg, as he explores the journeys of entrepreneurs and companies across Round Rock, Texas. From startups and nonprofits to large organizations, each guest shares their passion for doing business in this thriving community. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. It's Bryan Eisenberg. Welcome to Rock Solid. I'm joined today, probably one of the people I earliest met when I came down to the Austin area. Just pulled up a picture to show him. It's been 14 years since you ran a baseball camp for my son, Sammy. Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
First of all, I want to start with the big announcement because we're about to, and probably about when this gets aired, will be just about the time when the Round Rock Express will bring you into their Hall of Fame. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Pretty awesome honor.
There's a whole bunch of interesting stats that you hold that I think are very relevant for the whole audience. And I think, but whether you're a sports parent, whether you look at this as an athlete or as a business owner, one of the things that you did for the Round Rock Express is you played 7 positions other than the battery, right? You played every other position, and you were a very solid utility player. How does that mindset of being a utility player, not being the big star, play into what you see every day in the community as a banker today as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, versatility is huge. It certainly was when I had when my uniform was a little different as far as my job goes. Initially it was, when you're the bench guy and you have to start getting every glove and playing multiple positions, not always like the greatest thing because that means you're not locked down at, second base, which is when I came up to the big leagues and got my, start and debut, I was the second baseman. And so, when you transition into, I was teammates with Tony Clark when I was with the Diamondbacks, and he called us bench guys the significant others.
Yes.
So I love that, that title, but because you're important, but you're just not an everyday guy. And so being able to just, hey, wherever you need me, I got you. I mean, I was an emergency catcher catching bullpens, with the Diamondbacks. And so I think once, and not every guy is open to doing that.
No.
I think ego
especially
gets involved.
Today,
yeah. And so, for me, I knew it was what would keep a jersey on my back and keep giving me those opportunities. So, I embraced it, and it's that you're kind of like a Swiss Army. I definitely had every glove, and if you needed me, I could play anywhere you wanted. And I think just having that skill, whether it's on any sports field, because really any position in any sport, being versatile, or a coach knowing that you got a guy who's willing to do whatever for the team. I think, when you relate that to just life and certainly in this new world of banking for me, it's a lot of everything. Certainly a lot of learning at first, but then, and I think in any business or smaller business, sometimes you got to step in and
you got to wear all the hats
and help a customer out with something or get them an answer. And so I think that's the best part about, transitioning from, going to the field and then, the real business world that, certainly applies from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah, and there's a lot about your mindset that's real fascinating to me because obviously, you were drafted but decided to go to Vanderbilt instead, right? And then later on got redrafted. You chose that long-term vision, like knowing that, hey, I'm going to invest in myself first before the baseball career. The baseball career is great, and then everything you've done after that, from running the camps at the Round Rock Express for years and then going back to Cleveland with the Indians and working on their stuff, is all, and now with the banking, obviously, it's all about these relationships and this longer term approach to accomplishments as opposed to immediate satisfaction. And that's not a mindset a lot of business owners or a lot of people have. What helped you get that mindset, and what helped you, not get defeated when things didn't work exactly the way you hoped?
Yeah, I think for me, it all starts at home. When you think about the best coaches, or when you have that conversation, I certainly had a lot of them. But for me, it starts with mom and dad.
Yeah.
Setting the foundation of just, the right way to go about things. My mom, she's Italian Catholic, and so faith was a big part of that. Dad certainly, was a big part of just that process. And then certainly as we dug into, the sports side of things, whether it's baseball, basketball, whatever I was playing at the time, creating the mindset of, he always would have 3 quotes that he would always tell me growing up. The first one was, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll still be amongst the stars. Yep. Kind of that famous quote you see in a lot of, walls. The second thing was, preparation was always in season. So, in sports, there's the off season, the in season, but preparation is always in season. And this last one, maybe we have to dub it out, but he would say, you just got to chew nails and wipe your, what with sandpaper. And so, when you're little, those really, they didn't have a whole lot of meaning, but as I got older and he continued to kind of, just tell me those things, shoot for the moon it's just, you got to have goals, right? You got to have dreams. You got to know where you're going, so that now the process, right? The preparation is always in season. Kind of what you're working for. And then, that last one, the reality is life's tough. Certainly baseball is full of failure, as but life is tough, and we just have to be tougher if you want to be, successful, though. So those certainly at home were what guided me. And then, I was really fortunate to be, afforded the opportunity for a private Catholic education. I went K through 12, and when I look back at my high school years, I went to an all-boys Jesuit high school in Cleveland, St. Ignatius, and that foundation of just a Jesuit education, being a man for others, was just added to that foundation of just how you kind of want to go about and choose impacting the life, and how you wanted to kind of be an impact on the world. And so, and then as you said, along the way, it's about relationships. So, my kids are 17, and certainly as a parent, you're saying it's who you surround yourself with, which is real. And so for me, you obviously have your friend groups, you have your teammates who you're leaning on, and then, there's the coaches who, were mentors, who were everything, right? I know we'll probably get into coaching and development, but so I think it's that combination, in addition to just, individually finding out who I am and want to be, that personal self development and awareness, and then, just that whole growth and you take it all in, and that's kind of, who you are.
Yeah, and you're shooting for something, which is really important. I do want to dive into obviously youth development, because you've got your own kids in sports now, and I definitely want to touch on that. But I want to ask one other question kind of before we get there, which is, you happen to have been on the field when Randy Johnson threw his perfect game. So you talk about the big stars shooting for the moon in one of the biggest moments ever, and you were part of that. What was your biggest takeaway from the whole environment, from that day, that will always sit with you, that's a lesson that you would love to pass to more people if you could?
Ooh, that's a great question, because I talk about this a lot, but I don't think anyone said, what's that angle? I think if I would have to, and this might be a little cliche, but as we got into the game, and that, you looked up at first of all, Randy Johnson through, 4 or 5 innings dominating wasn't this
big deal,
out of the norm.
Yeah.
And it was in the 6th when, you look up at the scoreboard, and then individually you're sitting in, in the dugout, and you're like, there's no hits. I can see that, but then
no one's saying a word.
Nobody's. And this is what I remember, sitting there. Nobody's been on base. He's throwing, and then the nature of our minds, what starts to happen? It's way easier to visualize negative than positive. That's proven. And certainly my mind starts to go to, oh my gosh, what if I'm the guy? And from there, and you have the guys on your shoulder, and I had to, the mental side of my game was always a strength that separated me, but from that game it was hit it to me, hit it to me, hit it to me, hit it to me. I could not let space in my mind, with anything negative. So literally probably a million times, I didn't even care. Even when I was hitting, I was saying hit it to me because, you start to either think ahead or the what ifs. And so, the cliche of take it one day at a time or inning by inning, or batter or pitch by pitch, it really got to in the sixth to where, thankfully I had the good foundation. I know others, and the nature of baseball is, now there's a little bit of a clock in between, but before that there's no clock, and so sometimes guys take a little longer.
And your brain wanders.
Space,
a
lot of space for the mind. So certainly the lesson of
positive
staying present,
framing.
Staying in the moment, self-talk, being relentless, because as much as you have those tools and you're staying positive, the negative still comes in. So the reality is you just have to do one more thing different. And for me, the one thing that worked there was like literally this mantra of constantly just not allowing my mind to go there. And then, having video and seeing it, and I hadn't in a while. And so initially coming off, I honestly thought I made like 5 plays.
Okay.
Maybe made a play early, but then after watching the video, I realized, no, I made my plays. I made 3, or I assisted in 3 ground balls in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And so when you think about, the slow roller that Chad Tracy or at third base, or Alex Cintron at short made, or even the first play of the game, Jesse Garcia, local guy here in Round Rock,
Jesse's a great guy.
Tries to push bunt on Randy Johnson, which, by the way, don't do that to Randy. That set it off like, okay, now I'm good. Yeah,
he put it into another gear.
Yeah, Shea Hillenbrand makes a great play, and we don't really think about it. But then as you look back on the 9 innings, and there's always like the good plays. And for me, my plays were 20 hoppers, like normal play, which actually like made it like worse. At second base, you're couple of 3 tapping.
Yeah.
The one, I think it was the awesome part was like Julio Franco, right? Like who I grew up watching with the Indians. He was probably 48 at the time, when
maybe
he hits,
maybe
right.
On paper,
debatable. He hits me, probably a 6 hopper, and again, seeing the video, you tap a couple times. I just wanted to go over and touch first base myself. But, it was a lesson of just staying so focused and present, the one pitch at a time. And it's so cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, because it's real.
It's funny because I always tell people, like, after the podcast, and I love all the conversations I've had.
Yeah.
I'm so present here that oftentimes by the time we walk out the door, I don't remember the specifics of the conversation. I just remember how engaged, we were to it. And I love that lesson, because it is such a hard thing, especially today. We got so many distractions on the phone. Everything is competing for our attention. And, you've gone from, professional to coach to running these camps to doing that. And now you're a dad, a sports dad, right? You've got 2 kids, who are competing in different sports. We've also intersected there. My son trained in the same gym as your kids, and again, the lessons learned there are so important. And I want to dive into that part in a moment. But the bigger lesson, and I get frustrated. I'm helping my 20-year-old now who's volunteer coaching a 12U team at the Round Rock Baseball League. And we see some of the other coach dads, and they mean really well. Nothing against coach. I was a coach dad, right? I didn't play. But I see parents who get sucked into, especially, paying for teams, with coaches who are less than ideal, who teach a lot of the things that they shouldn't be teaching. I'll give you an example. I think it was the first year Sammy was playing for Action in high school. And the opposing coach, and luckily I didn't hear it during the game, but Sammy told me he heard it. Someone threw at him, and they threw towards his knees. And the coach from this other very well-known in the area team yelled, "That's not where I told you to throw it. I told you at his head."
Oh, man.
Okay. it's a win at all cost kind of mentality. Where do parents go wrong in choosing their coaches and the development for their kids, thinking they're either going to get to play in college or play professionally or just develop themselves as good humans?
I love this topic, and I think it doesn't get enough attention and focus because, when you think about coaching, your impact as a coach, you've done it, it's never neutral.
Correct.
It's either going to be a positive experience and a negative experience. And then the reality is coaching is hard. It's an art. And I think that the unfortunate part of some of these experiences that we hear, whether it's, I'm T-ball, coach pitch, the younger years where, listen, you and I are getting our arms like tugged because every league and sometimes organizations, they need coaches. There's a big need. And so it's pulling dad who's a little bit reluctant, who, you need a heartbeat and a warm body. And then, now you're trusting them with, this group of kids to one, teach the game. But as we know, sport, it's just it's for life,
so
it's an avenue to teach great life lessons, and that's intentional and that's work. And I think a lot of times, and this was a big focus when I was with the Indians overseeing youth baseball and softball development, our programs of summer camps in Cleveland, we don't get the weather, so you get those 9 weeks in summer and you're filling them up. And then on top of that, we're preaching multiple sport and not just single sport athletes. And so we're not doing programming all year round. So how do I scale that program? So even though it wasn't a revenue generating program with the Indians, you still wanted to impact as many. And so for me, I said, there really isn't a true defined coach development. There's USA Baseball, but I've always said, I'm an alumni. I played on, the national team my senior year in high school, got to, have a bronze medal. It's awesome. You go around here and people might know what USA Baseball is. They're the governing body. They have some resources, but if you and I want to coach at Round Rock Youth Baseball League, we're not, maybe there's the check off coaches clinic, but you kind of sign whatever, and then that's it. Maybe they do a background check. And so I think it's a tough conversation because there's the expectation as a parent, and then certainly when you're paying to play at higher levels
that we should win.
I've talked with Keith. I'm involved with Action. I'm a coach, and so it's there's good ways to do it, and there's not so good ways to do it. So I think you have to be intentional in providing coaches, the frameworks, the resources, and then it's not just check boxes, because I think there's great organizations. I was involved with, Positive Coaching Alliance, so you're familiar with. I know they had a chapter here in Austin, but Mark Shapiro now is on the board there. He was, he's a huge mentor of mine. So it's a great organization. I think it's let's go to the 1 hour workshop and we kind of, check that box, and there's no continuing, mentorship or aspect. And so with the Indians, that was one thing that, I collaborated with a guy, from the UK who used to train British forces. His name's Mark Bennett. And he'd been doing this with, British commandos, and then he, utilized all those, tools and frameworks within coaching across 30 plus different, sports. And so it was really robust. And so we kind of collaborated to create, the Indians' way to coaching excellence. And so it was a lot of those tools, but what it was, like anyone in business, certainly for me on the lending side, it's all new to me. I want feedback. I need that feedback because I need to make the adjustments just like a hitter would, like with their hitting coach. Coaches are the one who's really coaching them or giving them feedback. So I think that's where there's the miss where a team just goes off and a coach, he's learning from either how he was coached or, the great part about, picking up this phone you have all the resources, but you're having to figure out, especially as a parent who's kind of volunteering, like what's good, what's not so good. And then, and then I think the natural thing is to focus on, obviously, the technical, tactical part of it. And if you lose the behaviors, you can be the best, mechanical guy, but if your, culture and environment is not disciplined and it's all crazy, then that doesn't matter. So it's a big conversation, and one that, on the side, I'm still, passionate about, because the coach is at the center of everything.
Yeah. And, I wish more coaches, especially a lot of these dad coaches, and like I said, I was a dad coach, really understood the gravity of the weight of their coaching and what it means to the kids in the long term. Like, I can look back now, my son's 20, he's going to be, a baseball store manager at the new Shields that's opening up.
Yeah.
That would not have ever have happened if it wasn't for Brandon Janeka teaching him that discipline is freedom, because he was not a very good student before he got in that gym, right? And he taught him about the importance of getting your work done and doing that. And he came back to school that next year, and his teacher said, he's a whole different kid. Like, yeah, he changed him. And Keith Jackson, who taught him about the importance of all the little things, right? It's not about winning. It's about learning how to do all the little things right. And then eventually the winning comes because you've developed it. And I think a lot of coaches go in there and it's a win at all cost, and the parents are expecting that. And I mean, I've been at games where literally I was a T-ball coach, and the other coach dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah,
I'm like, where do we get this huge disconnect of where this world has gone to?
Yeah, and I mean, I hate seeing those videos as I'm scrolling.
Yeah.
and there's unfortunately too many nowadays.
Or
right,
with the umpires.
Yeah, and again, I think it's just a combination of being intentional about it, and as a coach, it's your job, and I think first and foremost, the job of a coach should be, what are we teaching about life, right? And getting that foundation, before
the skills,
the teaching, the important part, and winning. Listen, you play a game,
we want to win.
That's the goal, and there's a right way to do it. And so, I think on top of being intentional and either leagues having and making that intentional and holding them accountable. But I think at where I start with it, when you think about just in baseball, there's only, and really in life, there's only so many things that we can control. And so for me, I don't 100% take credit for coming up with ACE. So ACE for me, for as long as I can remember in high school, if you had looked at if I had one of my hats and game hats, it would be ACE. And for me, that was the reminder. Those are the three things that I can control. Now sitting here live, but certainly on the baseball field, was your attitude, concentration, and effort. And so, whether or not it's a group that I've been coaching the last couple years, the first time we get together, it's like John Wooden would do every year. I don't care if you won 9 in a row, 10 in a row, whatever. He's teaching you how to put your socks and tie your shoes the right way, and those basic fundamentals. And for me, as we start to get together with our group in the summer here in the next couple weeks, the very first thing for me is setting up that culture. This is how we do things here, and we are going to be ace, and we are going to be relentless in focusing on what we can control, because I saw it professionally. As your goal is to get in the big leagues, the guys who had all the talent in the world that never really made it, I noticed certainly the mental side of it, but they focus so much on trying to play GM of, man, when am I moving up? Or how come I'm not this guy? Like you can't control that. And so even though it was a big focus of mine as I got older, you saw how not doing that, and the impact it had to even double down even more on stay an ace and be an ace.
Which I'm sure is what you focus in on with your kids, obviously, as their development.
100%.
Well.
If they were here, they might roll their eyes, and that's the problem when you have the message. It sometimes gets lost, but I mean, it's what I do love about it. If you take and you saw my son's hat, I like that you've at least instilled some of those things, and it's his handwriting and it's not me like it used to be. Here's a reminder, because the good thing about a hat, and especially playing, you go to put it back on, and as you go to put it back on, it's that reminder, or when you're taking a deep breath, and you can look. And so it's certainly been, when you think about the Kata family values, it's certainly at the top of how you're trying to parent, which is tough.
For sure.
Yeah.
That could be a whole separate podcast.
Yep.
I'm curious whether now you're a commercial lender with our bank. Do you look for those similar qualities in the people you give loans to?
As I came into this world of banking, and just like anything, there's great people, as and just knowing within our bank, and then great mentors, and then the general learning of lending, the 5 C's of credit, and character is at the top and one of them. So as I got into, and it wasn't so scary, because as you talk with, even my brother-in-law, and you talk with people about, all right, well, what is banking? I had my bank account, but what really is banking? It's all relationships. And so we lived here in Round Rock for 10 years. And, I was a player, it was home base. And so you have your network. I mean, I just called it like my friends and my, and relationships, but now it's your network. And so coming back after being gone for 7 years, going back home to Cleveland, and then coming back and now getting into this banking world, it was like, okay, well, now this is my network. Yep. And you go to chamber events and you grow the network and you do the business, important things to get to know people and develop relationships. I mean, character is the biggest thing, certainly on a lending side, because you're lending them money, and so I think a lot of times it's when I was hiring, I had to hire for the first time when I was with the Indians, and so I mean, hiring, if you've ever done, it's a hard thing because everyone either comes in with their scripted answers and different things, and so I had a lot of great help from Mark Shapiro, and then Andrew Miller, who he pitched. Yep. He's with the Vikings now, but he was a great resource in just the best way to do it, because when I'm hiring baseball coaches who are coming to help kids, I don't want the typical how many golf balls can fit in a 740 that you would hear in these interviews. At the end of the day, I just wanted to know, I mean, if he was 21 or not, like, do I want to go have a beer with this guy? And I think very similarly, when, you're trying to cultivate a relationship that, is really a relationship where you're asking someone to, not just give a loan. We want, we want to bank you. I think that's important on both sides for,
culture,
one, for me to
matters.
Get to know you and be comfortable with just the person, but then also for them to be, comfortable with me and know that, one, you're a likable person. Because I think what I've learned and heard about the banking world, the guys who have been in it a while, is there's definitely the culture of the institution, but the reality is I tell all of my, customers, I mean, I know I'm my phone on me right now, but like this is how you get me, you know what I mean? And that's what kind of separates. And so, they got to be comfortable with me. So that's the part that I love is, the coffees, the lunches, and just getting to know, golf. Everyone has their, their jokes about, the banking. It was always the joke. I didn't know what that meant. And then of course that you meet someone, they're like, oh, banking hours. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that it kind of makes sense. But listen, that's part of the job, and I think that's a great part of the job. You're getting out in the community. You're meeting new people. We've seen each other at the events. You guys do such a great job of that, and so for me, that's the best part of it.
I want to wrap up with one last question because obviously your home is Cleveland, like it's always going to be a part of you, but Round Rock you have so many connections to, and it's become your home. It's where you're raising your kids. What was it about Round Rock that you knew it was, this is home too?
So it has to go back 2002. I was playing in El Paso, Texas for the El Paso Diablos, Texas League. I came up with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Round Rock was a Double-A team at the time, back in the day. So my first trip, my first impression to Round Rock actually wasn't great. I won't give the name of the restaurant, but you get in, team hotel. I had a meal and I got food poisoning, and it's a
great first impression.
4-game set, and I'm spending the first 3 days holed up in the in the Hilton, and then was only able to play the final game of the series.
At least you didn't get hit by the bad allergies that a friend of mine did first time he was here.
Well, and I've thankfully, knock on wood here, have dodged that whole part of it, being here for a while now. And so first impression Round Rock, but from getting to spend my first time at Round Rock Del Diamond and seeing how, as a visiting team, because at that point, I've played a couple years already, and that varies of just how you're treated, and that part of it, without knowing anyone involved in it at the time, was apparent right away. Wow, this is big league, even though it's minor league.
Yep.
To that point was the best I was treated. The facility field, Del Diamond, was unbelievable. And so later that year, made the All-Star team. The All-Star game was here in Round Rock. And as I'm checking in, I got to, at the time I didn't know it, but meet my future wife, Jillian. She was working with the team, doing marketing in minor league baseball. You do everything, right? And the connection also was I played with Brian Gordon, and came up with him with the Diamondbacks. And so Brian, Round Rock Dragon, and Brian's mom had worked for the Round Rock Express. She still works for the Round Rock Express, Wendy. And so as Brian and I came up, and I got to know, Wendy, his mom. Wendy had at some point randomly, as she got to know Jillian, had said, "Oh, you got to meet this," And so my side of the story is, I want to get to know, this Jillian a little more. And, my side of the story is, her, she was just going to marry the MVP of the game. Like that was her deal. So, I had to go and win the MVP of the game. But, when, she was living there at the time, and the story of, you always go where the girl is. Round Rock was, where we settled, and Cleveland's home for me. My family's all spread out. And so, and as great as I love Cleveland, we went there, for 7 years. It'll always be home. But, Round Rock, we set up our roots, got our first home, and even though it was where we spent the off seasons, the 4 months out of the year, even just in those 4 months, just, the community and how they, one, embrace a Yankee from Cleveland, but then just, just the way of life. Everyone talks about, Texas and that friendliness, which it's all real. And it rubs off on you, quick, because when we went back and moved back to Cleveland, right, the Northeast, and move into our neighborhood, and now you're walking around getting to know people, the natural Texas thing, and hey y'all, and waving, and now you're getting, you're getting these looks like, what are you being so nice for? And so it that's the best part, about just setting up roots here, and then coming back. Being gone for 7 years, the growth, crazy growth in good, and then whoever you ask, some people are like, no, I want my small little town back, but I think it's always good, and you're seeing there's a reason people want to come here to Round Rock, Williamson County. I think because of just that, that small town feel, and they're so accepting, of everyone, and it's an awesome place.
It is. If people have more questions for you, if they want to connect with you, maybe talk a little bit about what you do at our bank, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so certainly come down and see me. I'm at the Georgetown branch, right off the square. Awesome. Online. My email is all on there, and then every now and then I do color once or twice, radio with the Express. I always like to get there a little early, and I'm always catching a game randomly too with the family. So certainly can kind of find me and say hi there. And then all the socials. I can't even rattle them off. I should be able to now, but I'm not as active. But it's still a great platform to be able to connect with people and either provide resources or whatnot. And then I imagine if you find if you're walking around a random field, coaching is still
a big part of
a big part of what I do. So when I'm not dressed kind of like a banker and helping people out there, I'm still helping people kind of just maximize and love the game of baseball.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And again, congratulations on your Hall of Fame
thanks.
inauguration. We can't wait to be there and celebrate with you. And thank you for everything you do for our community.
Yeah, thanks for having me.